Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello. So I'm excited about today's project because I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm ready for a fun project again. I love those. So, setting the stage, we have fun pants. And this is it. It's a simplicity pattern. Oh, there's the number 9110, it looks like, reading backwards. And I'm going to be doing pants. I'm not going to be doing the square pockets. I'm going to be doing these pockets. You know, I just like the swoop better. But here's the thing. And if you lived through the 70s, you know the fear. I am using corduroy. There you go. It's pinwheel corduroy. Very, very fine. Very, very light. But I was looking at this pattern, and that is one of the suggested fabrics. And I thought, oh, how fun is this? So it's a light tan, as you saw. Now there's a place for a color option here, and they want you to use a bias tape. I'm going to make my own bias tape from a more of a chocolate color pinwheel corduroy. So it's very light, it's very flowy. I think it's going to be super comfortable. It looks pretty easy too. It's an elastic waist, wide pants, you know, so we're just going to have fun with this. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm looking at is, in general, I usually go for a size 16, okay? But these are like size small, medium, large, like that. And 16 falls in the high medium, but looking down here at the finished garment hip size for a size 16, well, it's 14, 16 is 45 inches. Yes, that will go over my hips. Yes, it will have a little bit of ease, but for something like this, I want it to have a whole lot more than just a little bit of ease. So I am actually going to cut out a size larger. I'm going to cut out the large size here. And the elastic, I can always make my elastic smaller, let it gather in a little more. If I want to taper in at the hip, I can do that. But I just think for something like this, I would much rather have it be lots of ease, lots of extra room to get comfy in than have it be too tight and possibly pull across there. So that's what I'm going to be doing for cutting. Now, on their model, it is cropped, and I'm shorter than the models usually are. And because this is, you know, we're going into fall and everything, I'm actually going to leave mine a little bit lower. So mine are not going to come all the way down to full length, or should they? I'm going to think about that while I'm cutting out my pattern. I might just make them full length so they come all the way down. That might be nice. Yes, I think I shall. There, a decision has been made. So there's that too. You can decide, you know, if you want them short, if you want them long, whatever you want, decide when you're cutting out your pattern, and we're just going to take it from here. Look at this, how great is this? So for the version I'm going to do, I literally just have a front, a back, a pocket, and a casing, and that's it. So we have some fun things with corduroy. First, it has a nap. So you need to make sure that when you're cutting out your pieces, they all have the same top, okay? So don't put lay it out with like the top of one pant this way and the top that way. Because it's subtle, you won't notice it until you have it, but they'll look like two different colors. So just make sure they're all going the same way. Use the layout for something with nap. And also be a little careful when you're ironing. This looks like 100% cotton. I don't know for sure, but it looks like it. So I'll just be a little bit careful, but because it's pinwheel, it's not the big thick wales, I think that I will be okay. I just won't press super hard, but I think that I can iron it lightly with some steam, and I should be able to get all of these wrinkles out. So I did pre-wash this. I did run it through my dryer on hot to try to shrink it up, but I need to square off the top. And so I made one pull, but that wasn't good enough, so I'm going to make another little clip about 1 inch lower and tear it and see if that's going to get me. Nope, not quite enough there. Let me start on this side this time. All right, now we have a top that is nice and straight. And that is really important on corduroy because we have all of these lines. And so we want to make sure that when I'm laying out my pattern, it's perfectly straight at the top. And that way, as I lay it out, my grain lines are going to make sure that my pattern is also perfectly straight. Okay, so I have my pattern just placed on top of my fabric. I'm trying to get my camera up high enough so you can see. I don't know if I'll be able to here. But what I wanted to point out is that on something like this, where it's really important that I get it totally on the straight, because, you know, corduroy and all that implies, what I do is up here at the top, move you over, up here at the top of my grain line, I haven't pinned it or anything, I just have a couple weights sitting here so it won't fly away. I'm going to put my ruler at the lining up with the arrow, and way down here at the edge, which is off camera, but trust me, it says 10 3/8 right here. So now I can move it down to the end over here, line it up again with the end of my grain line, just to make sure that the edge of my fabric is still at that same the same measurement from the grain line to the edge. And then I can feel really secure, go ahead and put some pins on here and cut it out. And remember, because it is a nap, this is my bottom, my top is up there, so my next piece that I put down, the top will be right here, so that they're all going the same way. With all of the other pattern pieces cut out, I am just slicing up this little piece of chocolate brown corduroy into bias strips, so I can use these to go around the pockets and wherever else I want to. I know that there is a really neat method for making a continuous bias tape strip, and I've done that on other videos, but I don't need a whole lot. I just need a lot to go around pockets. But once I got started cutting, I just couldn't stop myself, so I'm slicing the whole thing up, and maybe I can use the extra somewhere else. I'm going to be making my bias tape first, and I kind of like doing this because it's going to give me an opportunity to play with this fabric and see how it's going to react to an iron before I actually start working with my main piece. So I've got my little bias tape maker device here, and my strips I cut it 2 inches wide, which is what this folds into. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to lightly put my hot steam iron on top of the corduroy. I'm not going to really press it, but I am going to touch it and just slowly work my way down. And just see what that does to the texture of it. I'm almost done with this little strip. Follow it off the end. So with all of that pressing done, this is the inside, and you can still see all of the little ridges from my corduroy, and also on the outside. And that's able to give me a nice crease on the edge without totally crushing it. That's what I wanted to see, is if I could iron this without crushing it. And the answer is yes, yes I can. So I'm going to go ahead and make up a few more of these little strips just to have, I'm not sure exactly how many I'll need, and then get back to the table. I believe that my bias tape needs to go above the pocket up here and around the outside edge. So I have 2 pieces of each length to go around both of my pockets. So there really aren't a lot of markings on here. There's a dot up here, there's dots up here, and a notch here. So because we're going to be encasing the edges here, I'm not going to be serging around it right now. I'm just going to put these on first. But before I do that, I do want to go ahead and mark my pattern. So right now I have the right side out, and I do want to mark this on the right side out because that's what I'm going to be looking at when I use these dots. So we're okay. Let me go ahead and punch out my circles. Again, I use a little piece of leather behind my tissue paper so I don't go all the way through any fabric or anything like that. Here's one, here's another. And I am using my heat erasable pens. This is 100% cotton, and they come right off of 100% cotton, so that is not a problem. I'm going to go ahead and mark up here, over here, and over here. Okay, and the only other marking is this notch, and I'm just going to get my big old scissors. I actually bought some fall fiskars with pumpkins on them, but I forgot them at my friend's house today, so I will have fall inspired pumpkin scissors up here soon, because you know that's what you need to do. All right, so I just was reading the instructions and I found out something that I didn't notice on the pattern. If you look very closely on the one with square pockets over here in the diagram, the tape around the pockets are dark. Okay, for those square ones. Over here for the swoop ones, the tape around is not dark, because when you look at the instructions, they want you to make the tape on the inside so it's not visible. Okay, but I kind of like the look of it being on the right side, so it's more of like a focal point statement. So what I'm going to do, you know, I always do something different, is I am going to reverse their instructions. They are putting the instructions so that what they want you to do, let me just show you this, is to match up the right sides, sew it like this, pretend that pin is sewing, press it open, understitch it, and turn the whole thing inside. All right, I am going to do that opposite. I'm going to use the wrong side of my fabric and put my right side of my tape against the wrong side of my fabric and stitch it at that same point, which is about 3/8 of an inch in, or where that fold is. Okay, bring it up, understitch it here, so I'm still looking at the wrong side, which is going to make it so that when I push it out, my bias tape is going to be on the outside, and I will have a big 1-inch wide band coming all the way around. And I do believe, because this corduroy has some stretch in it normally, so that in addition to the stretch built in from the bias is going to give me more than enough to be able to make this curve. So that's how I'm going to do it. Same instructions, except where they say right side, I'm doing wrong side. This is the right side, okay? And I want my band to be on this side, and I don't want to see any of this stuff, okay? So when you understitch something, the side that the facing goes towards is the hidden side, all right? So instead, if I push the seam allowance towards the pocket, okay, so this is my right side, pushing it towards the pocket this way, and then come back and put my understitching over here, all right, right there. What that's going to do is hold this really securely so that when I curve it, it's going to want to pull that way. I figured it'd be easier just to show you what I meant. So here I have done my row of understitching, okay? And this is a 1/16 of an inch in. And on this side, it's right here. It's this gray thread right there, okay? So with this being the right side of my pocket, all right, I can now turn it, and that understitching is going to make all of this want to curve towards the back. So that looking at it from the back side, I see a hint of that chocolate brown on top. But looking at it from this way, I don't see any of this tan color. And that's what I want, and it's going to hold nice and flat. So now that that is understitched, what I can do is come back, pin it in place, and try to gently form it so that it's going to make this curve. If I need to iron it, I'll go ahead and press it before I stitch it. And then I'm going to come back here and make another row of stitching right here, another 1/16 of an inch in on this side, all the way across. Actually, before I do that, because I'm going to need this facing to be folded in the opposite direction it wants to, I'm going to come in here and just carefully cut some notches just so that it has the freedom to be able to spread open when I fold the bias tape up. Okay, so now that it is all clipped, now it's going to be a lot easier to make this fold down flat. And see, because it's clipped, it can spread out more. So I'm just going to tug on the edge of my bias tape to try to get it used to the idea that it needs to stretch out. Go ahead and pin it down here. And I think I am going to actually hit this part and over here with my iron before I go over to my sewing machine, just so that it's going to want to lay flat before I get over there and make it permanent. So I haven't I haven't sewn it yet. I did take it over to my iron really quickly and just gave it a really quick press, kind of in between the pins, because I don't want to press it on top of my pins because that can leave an imprint, okay? So just like that, and that relaxes this fabric and makes it stay nice and smooth. So now when I go over to my sewing machine, it'll be easy to stitch. Okay, so I'm over here and I wanted to show you, I am using my 1/16 of an inch edge stitch foot. It has a little blade over here that's at 1/16 of an inch off center, okay? So I can just set it so that I can run that blade exactly on the side of my fabric, and I will get a really precise gauge to go down here. You don't need it. You know, sometimes you can just use a narrow foot or something that has a gauge on the side of it, but it's nice. It's fun. All right, so this is one pocket, my outside band. On the inside, you can see where this row of top stitching is, right here. I think it looks really great on the outside. I was just about to go ahead and explain how to do the bottom edge, which is, it's the same way, but it's slightly different because you're stretching it more around the corner as you sew it on. Took a look at the instructions, and there is no bias tape band on the bottom. I should really read these before I turn on the camera next time. So the way they have this is that they just have it folded in with a little bit of a gathering in the corner to crimp it in, and then stitched on, okay? And I think I've already departed from the basic instructions by making this, so, you know, to keep it somewhat as the pattern should be, I won't do this, but I have all of this tape now, and I might do something different. I might, you know, use it somewhere else, you know, because it's actually really cute bias tape. But I'll just set that aside for now, so our pockets are only going to have the top edge. Okay, so while I was at my machine finishing up the second pocket, I went ahead and put gathering length stitches all around the curve here. And now what I need to do is, first of all, change my thread so it's a lighter color thread so it won't be as obvious as this one. But I need to stitch both of these pockets along the edge here at 5/8 of an inch. And it looks like just a regular stitch length that you would make for a seam all the way along, and that's going to give us a guide to fold on. Alright, so I have stitched it, and you see this stripe on here? That is the tracks of my presser foot on there. And it's going to come off, especially when I wash it, but it's just that anything like that can make an imprint onto corduroy. But you know what? These are comfy, casual pants, so I'm not going to worry about it. But along these lines right here, that's our guide for folding. So on this one, I actually started folding it, and I turn it so that my stitching line is just on the inside, okay? It's not visible out here. And now that I have it like this, I'm not actually going to mess with these end pieces out here. Instead, what I'm going to do is come in here and fold up the very middle and get a straight pin, and halfway through, well, like right here, it's still flat. So I'm going to put a pin there too, okay, holding those two. Right here in the middle, I'm going to put a straight pin in and give it a little pull. And that is going to create the gathers I need right there. And now I can even all of that out and press it flat. So when I go over to the ironing board, that's going to press flat right there. So let me go ahead and do the same thing over here. There's this one on this side of it. The right where it starts to curve is right here. So I'm going to put a little straight pin there to anchor it. And right here in the very middle, I am just going to grab a thread, cinch it up a bit, and get it all smoothed out. So now I can go over to my iron, press this down, cut these threads from the outside. I don't really need those. And this pocket will be nice from the outside and ready to stitch onto my front pants piece. All right, so skipping over to the pants now, this is my front piece. And I am just going to clip where my notches are. And the view that we are doing that has the swoopy pocket on it is view C. So we're ignoring this square because that is for a different view. But there's a dot up here and a dot down here. And these are our matching dots for our pocket piece. So these pocket piece dots are going to match up there. And this one's going to match up over here. Okay. So I'm going to need to mark those, and doing the very same thing that I always do is punch out the holes first with my little leather underneath and come back with my little heat erasable pen and make those marks. I think I have one more little notch here I need to clip. And that is it. So let me go ahead and take these off, and we will place the pocket on top. What's going to help here is this notch matching up with this notch, because my dots have kind of gotten covered up and erased by the band here. So if I match up this notch in my pocket, I will get a much better idea of where to place everything. Now, the very top of this band should match up with this dot. It looks like I'm a little bit short for some reason. Not gonna sweat that. Put that there, and up here, okay, this band, move you over here. This band should center in between these two marks. So I'm just gonna put that there with the very top of this fabric lining up. I'm gonna pin that. up here and right here. All right, I'm just going to kind of smooth everything out here and put a few more pins. The next thing I'm going to do is go over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to put a basting stitch along this edge and along here. All right, then what we're going to need to do is top stitch this edge. So I'm going to run a line of stitching. They want you to do 2 rows, okay? So the 1 row is going to be a 1/16 of an inch in, using my little guide and everything the same as up here along the very edge. Once I have that very edge done, then I can come inside of that and make another one. They say a 1/4 inch away. So I'm going to end up with 2 rows of stitching about a 1/4 inch away from each other, going this whole route. But I would baste the top and baste the side first, just so those 2 positions are really locked in well. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So here is my machine basting down here. This is my top stitching, and then this one's a 1/4 inch, and I just use this stitch as a guide for that, you know, because my presser foot's a 1/4 inch wide, so I could just lay it on there and go around. And then once I had all of that done, there's basting up here, I went ahead and serged just at the very edge of the entire piece, just to keep it from ever wanting to fray. And I even did it at the bottom. Now, like I told you, I'm going to make these longer, but because I'm shorter than their standard model is, and I cut a size larger, because the larger your pieces are, the longer they are for this pattern, I think that it's going to work as is with the size large cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and get the other piece looking exactly like this. All right, so I have my back pants piece here, just clipping my notches. There really aren't any other marks except for notches for matching on the back piece. So once I have that, I'm going to take the individual pieces and serge around each one all the way around. So this is my back, one of my back pant legs here, and I have serged around the whole edge in the back there. I'm going to layer my front piece, my coordinating front piece over it, and sew together the inseam here. So I'm sewing the front to the back at the inseam. I'm going to do that at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once I have that, I will press it open. So now that my center seam here sewed, pressed open, now I'm going to connect the 2. So I will be putting this one down right on top of it, matching up the center seam. There's a notch on each side and in the top. And this will also be sewn at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. But what I do is sew it once and then come back in, you know, where the curve starts, or you can do the entire thing, honestly, but re-stitch it again 1/8 of an inch inside, just to give it a little bit extra strength, just in case, because this is the part that's going to be under pressure, you know. All right, so you can see my first stitch, and then I came back and I went back and forth a few different times down here just in the center crotch. But I have a second row of stitching just to make sure everything is going to be good. So what I'm going to do now is come back and press this seam allowance, you know, pretty well open. And then we're going to flip it the opposite way and sew our side seams. So this is my crotch here. This is my side seam, my front and my back pinned together. And these pant legs are crazy, crazy wide. So I'm going to go ahead and on both sides, sew it at a 5/8 seam allowance and press this open. It's time to work on the casing. The pants are coming together really cute. Take a look, aren't they cute? All right, so there are 2 pieces to this casing. And there are 2 little dots over here. These dots are marking the opening, because you're basically going to be making a big circular, not really a tube because there's a seam allowance on it, but you need to have an opening to thread your elastic through. And this is supposed to be using 1 inch wide elastic, and that is what this is, so we are in business there. So what I need to do is sew these together. So they are wrong sides together. Let me put them right sides together here. And on this side, I sew completely across it. On this side, I'm going to need to remark it because I cannot see my marks on this side. And then on this side, where I have my 2 little marks, I'm going to sew up to 1 mark, leave an opening, and then the rest of the way across. Both of them at 5/8 here and here. Okay, so this one is solid, this one has the opening, and what they want us to do is fold this in half, sew it, and make a casing to slide this big thick elastic through here. But you know what that means is they have these openings, and I can just see trouble of trying to feed elastic through all that, and that's going to make me nuts. So what I'm doing is getting some of my little 1/2 inch wide stitch witchery, and I am going to glue these little flaps down on both sides so that when I come back with my bodkin and elastic pulling it through, it's not going to have any trouble getting through this. So I'm going to do that on this side and also on this side. So now that these are fused down with stitch witchery and I'm not going to have any trouble getting through there, what I'm going to do is fold my band in half, matching up my centers and my seam allowances all the way around, and I'm going to come back and baste it closed on the machine. It doesn't really say, but I'm going to do it down here towards the edge at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just so that I can hold it closed, but I have as much space up here as possible to feed my elastic through. All right, so I got my big pants here, I've got my casing, and after I basted it, I came back and ran a row of serging along the edge just to make sure nothing's going to fray, because this is going to be exposed. So now what I need to do is pin it so that my seams on my casing are matching up with the side seams of my pants, like this, and you're just going to be sewing it straight on. Now, as I'm pinning this on, I am finding that I have extra fabric in the pant part that I'm going to need to ease in, okay? And it's a small enough amount that I can do it with the feed dogs. So I'm just going to kind of split the difference here. You know, there are notches you can match up over here, but for the bulk of it, I am just going to pin it about in the middle. And when I sew it, I'm going to sew it like this with the waistband on top and the pants on the bottom, and just let the feed dogs work it in. Just hold it, you know, fairly securely so that the feed dogs have to work to pull it backwards, and that's going to work all of that in. So I'm not going to worry about too much, because if you see, I can actually just kind of press it and it will work its way back in. So when you see it and it looks like, oh my gosh, these aren't matching, a lot of times it will. You just need to kind of smoosh it on a little bit. But I'm not sure if that's a technical word, but we will smoosh it in and sew it like this. So I want to show you how I split the difference in this. Is say, here is my bigger part, here's my smaller part, okay? I fold it in half so that the smaller part is on the inside, and that's going to kind of generally form it with the same amount of ease all the way around. So then I can just pinch that in the middle and put a pin right there, okay? And that gives you a much smaller surface area to work through, and if you need to do it again, you can. You know, if you get this part and it's still too much ease, you can do the same thing, bend it in half and put another pin. All right, so I have it sewn all the way around at 5/8, okay? Now what the instructions want you to do is come back in here and stitch it again through all of this, a 1/4 inch in, so kind of where this line is here, and then trim off the excess. And the second row of stitching is supposed to keep the excess from wanting to fray, okay? I'm not going to do that because I have it serged once, so it's not going to fray. But if I look at this on the outside, I see top stitching, okay, so I'm going to throw that out there. But I also see where if I press this, yes, it's going to help. But I feel like since there's top stitching already, I'm actually going to kind of do a top stitching slash understitching kind of thing. And push my seam allowance down, because that's how they're going to want you to do. They're going to want you to push your seam allowance down. And run a row of stitching right on this side here, you know, kind of like at this same distance, about a 1/16 of an inch in. And that is going to reinforce the casing band, but also help it lay super smooth and I think make it lay a lot flatter. So I've sewed it around and I didn't have the camera over, but I want to tell you, when you're coming around this way, if you've done like I've done with the big old thickness here, and it is doubled because it's folded down, when you get to this point, it might be hard to get your sewing machine to come up and go over without skipping a stitch. So if you have, I have a little tool that I slip in there, but even a piece of cardboard, a piece of something that if you can lift up your presser foot with the needle down and slip it under the back of your presser foot or around it and then put it back down, it'll keep it on the same level or closer to it as this. It'll be able to go straight across instead of trying to go up and over, and you won't skip any stitches. So just wanted to point that out. And also, I think it looks pretty good. You know, it's gonna hold it. There are a couple places where when I was easing everything in, it was a little bit puckery, you know, you can see, but there's gonna be elastic on here, so the whole thing is gonna be puckery. So these little wrinkles and stuff are not gonna, you know, make any difference at all. And I have not hemmed the bottoms yet. And that is because even though the instructions wanted you to hem it before you did this, actually, I wanted to wait until after, because that way I could try them on. Because you never know exactly where they're gonna hit on you until you have the waistband and everything done. So I'm gonna get this done, try them on, and then we'll work on the hemming, depending, and my hemming technique is going to depend on how long they are. So anyhow, remember we have these seam allowances stitch witchery together, so that's helpful. And I just have my little metal bodkin, and hopefully we can squeeze my big old 1-inch non-roll elastic in here and work it all the way around. So I'm getting to the back of my pants. It's getting harder to pull, you know, because that's the nature of things. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing it up, and there's a little loop at the end of my bodkin you can kind of see there. So I'm just going to stick a straight pin straight through that loop so it's kind of locked into place, and use that straight pin as a handle to hold it up here while I'm pulling things down, just because, you know, it's tougher towards the end. Down here at the end, I'm just gonna put a pin through this end piece to keep it from wanting to suck up in there while I'm finishing up. And I'll bring this piece over here to match it. Okay, so I got it through, and I don't think I showed. This is a bodkin. It's like big old pinchers, and it has a little slidey lock to keep them held together, but it's really handy. They have them shorter. This is a slightly longer, and then they have some like super long ones, but this one, I think it's about 4 inches long, and it's really handy. So anyway, highly recommended. Putting that aside. So first I want to make sure that my elastic is not twisted in any way, okay? And keeping a couple inches at least of this sticking out. I need to go get a little thin fabric that I'm going to use to attach these two together. Okay, so this is just a little piece of muslin that I've cut, and I'm going to get my two ends. We're going to sew them separately. Actually, this one I'm going to attach to it here and just run zigzaggy stitches over it. And then once that's attached, this one is going to get attached here, okay? And it will be attached with zigzaggy stitches. And then I can just either trim off the edge or, you know, let that wrap in. But that way they're not overlapping, so I don't have that extra bulk, and they will be very secure. And I'll probably run, when I'm doing the second one, zigzags over the very center just to lock that in so they don't want to fray. So this is what it looks like when I'm done. It is not beautiful, it is not elegant, but man, it is going to do the job for me. And I just kind of ran it, backed it up, ran it, backed it up, and worked my way across, all right? So now I am going to stretch out my waistband, guide this in so it can pop in here, hopefully. There you go, it's all popped in. And honestly, it's very secure. You really might not even need to close this up because there's no way anything's going to come out of it. I might actually leave it open just in case at some future date this elastic gets stretched out. It would be very easy to just grab a little of it, pull it out, cinch it in, and let it snap back in. So, you know, nothing's coming out of there, so I'm just going to leave that. So give me a minute. I'm going to try them on and see how we're going to hem these up. Okay, actually, there's a couple things here. First, fits great. The final length of the pants at the cut edge is exactly where I want the end of the hem to be. So we're going to do something fun with that. Trying it on, I wanted to try it on without securing this just to see how it would do. And even though the elastic did not twist, it didn't feel like it was going to, it felt like it would be more secure if I did a little bit of reinforcement here. So what I'm going to do is come up in the side seams here, and I am going to close this up after all. Well, which one is it? This one. I'm going to close that up, but I'm going to close it up by doing a stitch in the ditch here on this side and this side, and I think I might do it in the center back also, and up here. I'm not going to do it in the center front just because that would be very, very obvious, you know. But I think these three positions are going to hold it in case the elastic starts to give at some later date and the rigidity of it starts to get, you know, worn out. At that point, it might want to twist. And so by doing the little stitch in the ditch over here and back here and here, it's gonna hold it more in place. So that's not going to want to happen. All right, so I've got my little stitch in the ditch going here on both sides and the back, and I think that that's going to really help it be more secure. Now, remember when I made that bias tape to go here, but we didn't use it because the pattern didn't want us to? I am going to use my bias tape to bind my bottom hem, because I think that'll tie in that little trim at the pocket. Plus I get to use it because, you know, I made it. And I think it's going to be fun because the bottom edge of these, when I tried it on, is down to exactly where I want. Now on the pattern, they're shown as more of a crop pant, but because of the fabric and the color and everything, this is going to be more of a fall-ish, around the house in winter time pant for me, so I want it longer. So I'm going to be putting it on again so that the band is showing on the right side. So what I need to do is make a band out of my bias tape first that's the right size. So I'm just going to, and this does stretch, so if I don't have it, you know, to the 1/16 of an inch, it's a little bit forgiving, so that's fine. So I'm just going to fold that, bring it back over here, raise you up. Okay, so I can tell right here at that point is where I'm going to need them to be connected. So I'm just going to draw a little line there and a little line here so I can match those up and sew them together. Now, there are all kinds of ways to do this. You can do it at a diagonal, do it all kinds of ways. I'm just going to do a very simple open it up and go straight across. For these pants, it's going to be fine, so I can match up where I just made that mark and where these fold lines are, and open it up, and I'm going to stick a pin. Actually, I'll just stick my little chalk marker on the outside right where that's going to be, and that way I can see it. And I'm just going to sew straight down, open up this side too, obviously, And I'm just going to sew straight across, clip the trim off here, the extra off with some pinking shears, press it open and press the whole thing closed. And then I should have a loop that's the right size to go around the bottom of my pant leg. All right, so I've got my pants inside out, and I am going to open up my one folded edge here, and I'm going to try to make sure that my seam lines do not overlap. Like if I have a seam here and I have a seam in my tape, I'm going to try to, you know, put it somewhere else because I don't want too much fullness there. And I'm just going to line up the very edge of my tape with the edge of my fabric. And I'll be sewing it all the way around at the fold line here, all the way around one big loop. So let me fling this around the back side here so that when I do it, then I can open it back up this way. All right, so right where the fold line is my guideline. I believe it's 1/2 inch on this, but wherever, if you're going to do this, you know, if your fold line's in a different place, just go by that. So once I had it sewn on, I pushed the seam allowances towards the right side. This is the right side of the pants, and I pushed them up away from my band, okay, because I'm going to understitch it here. So from this side, looking at it this way, I was able to run a row of understitching here, which is on top. All the seam allowances are underneath here, okay? Because the understitching is on the side that is the private side that nobody needs to see, okay? So that way, on the right side, oh dear, look at that. I got a mess right there I need to fix. But anyway, we'll look at it here. So from the right side, when I go to fold this up, you're not going to see that tan shade there. But on the wrong side, you can see a little bit of the dark, okay? And that is fine because that's what I want. I want the dark to curl over and underneath and have the tan part invisible down here. And then I'll just need to come back, you know, keep the pin this in place up here and run a row of top stitching up here. Again, about 1/16 of an inch in, straight across here, and that's going to lock that band into place. So let me go back and fix that spot. Where was it? Oh, somewhere. Right here. When I was coming back doing my understitching, it looked like my seam allowance got a little skewed. Honestly, it really doesn't matter that much because it's going to be hidden anyway, but it'll just make me feel better to fix that. So let me do that, put it up, and top stitch it into place. All right, so it's all hemmed up, and let's see if you can see my little stitching line here, and it's folded under the edge, and then this is what it looks like underneath. Oh, that's where I started and stopped my stitching, huh? And I think it looks really good. And I think because it's a thick enough band, it's actually gonna add some dimension to my bottom hem. So I like that. And they're very comfortable, and before anyone asks, I bought this. I did not make it, but it's one of those big rectangles with sleeves, so it's really not difficult, and I bet there's a pattern. And if anyone's interested, I'll try to find a pattern for it. But I'm not talking about sweater. I would call these almost the best beginner pant pattern because there's no fit. I mean, it's elastic and it's wide-legged and there is no fly, but it has pockets and good size pockets, which is really nice. And because it's elastic and because it's very wide, it's very forgiving as far as all of the little places that sometimes trousers and fitted trousers can give you trouble, you know? So it's very comfortable, super comfortable. and I like it. I like it. I can't really think of anything that needs to be changed. And the only reason I did my pocket bias tape exposed and everything is just because I was kind of thinking that's what the pattern said, so that's what was in my mind, and I was really picturing it with the little contrast and everything, and then when I saw the pattern and saw no, not for this view, you know, I threw it in anyway. But you can see that you can change things like that. It is a fashion design option. So yeah, it's great, and I know this was a very short one, but sometimes you just need that. And I hope that if anyone wants to try these, that you do, because if anything, perfect lounge pants. And I can also see that if you made them out of a very heavy but drapey type of a fabric, and maybe omitted the pockets or something, it could, like if you did it out of a black or something like that, it could turn into a really classy type of a pant that you could wear under a really classy tunic or something like that. So, you know, just an option. So, hope you liked it. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful my houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.